You've made it, after days on a road that was more mud than path, dodging robbers and praying the rain wouldn't wash you into a ditch. You see it. Hanging from a crooked post is a wooden sign, crudely painted with a mug that looks like it lost a fight with an axe. This is the Splintered Mug, your sanctuary for the night. Forget the grand, bustling inns of fantasy tales. This is the real deal. It's a timber-framed building, leaning slightly to one side, as if exhausted from centuries of wind and rain. The windows are small, covered with oiled cloth that glows faintly from the light inside, and the thatched roof is a patchwork of old and new straw. Before you even push open the heavy wooden door, the smells hit you. It's a complex symphony of wood smoke, damp wool, roasting meat, unwashed bodies, and spilled ale, a scent that's both repulsive and deeply comforting to a weary traveler. As you step inside, a wave of noise and warmth washes over you. The heart of the inn is the common room, a large, low-ceilinged hall thick with smoke from a massive central hearth. The air is hazy, catching the flickering light of tallow candles and the roaring fire, and the floor is a mess of trampled rushes, mud, and whatever the last patron dropped. Long, rough-hewn trestle tables are packed with a cross-section of medieval life. In one corner, a group of merchants in sturdy wool cloaks mutter about trade routes and profits, their eyes darting around suspiciously. Nearby, a few local farmers, their faces weathered from a life in the fields, nurse their wooden mugs of ale and exchange gossip. A lone pilgrim sits quietly, his staff leaning against the table, his gaze distant as he contemplates the road ahead. And of course, there are the less reputable characters, a gambler with shifty eyes engrossed in a game of dice, a couple of rough-looking soldiers for hire, and maybe even a cutpurse looking for an easy mark. This isn't just a place to rest, it's a social melting pot, a hotbed for news, rumors, and potential trouble. The innkeeper, a stout man with a suspicious squint and an apron stained with the ghosts of 1,000 meals, gives you a quick once-over. His job isn't just to serve drinks. He's a security guard, a banker, and a source of information, all rolled into one. He sizes you up, calculating what you can afford before grunting a welcome and pointing you toward an empty space on a bench. There's no menu, no hostess, just a shared experience of survival. You slide onto the bench, the wood worn smooth by countless travelers before you, and for the first time in days, you can finally let your guard down. You're not safe, not really, but you're no longer alone. Welcome to your medieval home away from hell. Now that you've found a spot on a crowded bench, your stomach reminds you why you stopped here in the first place. Don't expect a menu. The innkeeper's wife, her face perpetually flushed from the heat of the fire, will bring you what everyone else is having, pottage. It's a thick, savory stew that's been simmering in a giant cauldron over the hearth for, well, it's best not to ask. New ingredients are added daily, vegetables like cabbage, leeks, and turnips, grains, and if you're lucky, a few scraps of bacon or salted meat. It's served in a rough wooden bowl with a hunk of dark, dense bread that's so hard it could double as a weapon. You won't get a fork or plate. You'll use your own knife if you have one, and the bread serves as your utensil for sopping up the stew. To wash it down, you'll drink ale. Weak, cloudy, and served in a wooden or leather mug, ale is the lifeblood of the inn. The water is unreliable and often dangerous, so everyone, men, women, and even children, drinks ale from morning till night. It's not about getting drunk, it's about staying hydrated without dying of dysentery. If you're a wealthy merchant, you might be able to afford imported wine, but for most, ale is the only choice. As you eat, you're elbow to elbow with strangers, the concept of personal space a luxury for a future time. The noise is constant, a mix of boisterous laughter, heated arguments over dice games, and the occasional burst of song from a corner where a traveling minstrel is trying to earn his supper with a lute and a few bawdy tunes. Gambling is rampant, with men hunched over games of hazard, their fortunes riding on the roll of the dice. Fights can break out over anything, a disputed debt, a stolen glance, or simply too much ale. The innkeeper usually lets it play out unless it threatens his property. This isn't a place for quiet contemplation. It's loud, chaotic, and intensely alive. When the night grows late and the fire burns low, it's time to think about sleep. Don't get your hopes up for a private room. For the common traveler, sleeping arrangements are communal. The innkeeper might lead you upstairs to a large chamber filled with several beds, or more likely, just point you to the common room where you'll sleep on a straw pallet on the floor near the fadding warmth of the hearth. If there are beds, you'll be sharing one with 2 or 3 complete strangers. You're expected to sleep in the clothes you're wearing, and the only rule is to minimize fidgeting and avoid touching your bedmates. The mattress is a simple bag stuffed with straw, crawling with fleas and lice who are thrilled to have a new guest. There's no privacy, no silence, and no guarantee of a good night's rest. You'll be serenaded by a chorus of snores, coughs, and the drunken mumblings of your fellow sleepers. The only source of heat is the combined body warmth of everyone in the room. Waking up in the middle of the night to use the chamber pot in the corner is a public affair. Staying at a medieval inn isn't about comfort, it's about surviving the night with your coin purse and your life intact. The hour before dawn is not morning. It's a colder, deeper blackness, a time when the night feels like it might just decide to stay forever. Long before the first rooster even considers clearing its throat, long before the faintest hint of grey dares to challenge the dark, the day begins. There is no gentle awakening, no slow stretching into consciousness. There is only the cold. It seeps through the timber-framed walls, radiates up from the packed earth floor, and settles deep in your bones. You are the innkeeper, and the cold is your first unwelcome guest of the day. Your bed is a simple straw mattress, perhaps in a small chamber partitioned off from the main room, a luxury of privacy most of your patrons can't afford. It's a space you share with your wife and most likely your children, all huddled together under a thick wool blanket for warmth. The concept of a private bedroom for each family member is a fantasy reserved for nobles in their great castles. Here, life is communal, even in sleep. You untangle yourself from the sleeping limbs of your family. The small grunts and sighs of your children the only sound in the suffocating quiet. Your movements are practiced, slow, careful not to wake them. Their work will begin soon enough. You dress in the darkness, pulling on the same rough-spun tunic and trousers you wore yesterday. The fabric is stiff, still holding the chill of the room. As you descend the creaking wooden stairs, a symphony of smells rises to greet you. It's a potent, layered aroma, the ghosts of last night's wood smoke, the sour tang of spilled ale soaked into the wooden tables, the faint, greasy scent of mutton stew, and underneath it all, the undeniable perfume of unwashed humanity. The great common room is a landscape of slumbering bodies. This is where the majority of travelers sleep, on benches, on the floor near the fadding warmth of the hearth, or even slumped over the tables. You step carefully around them, a collection of merchants, pilgrims, and laborers all sprawled in the exhausted democracy of sleep. A boot lies near the hearth, a tipped tankard has left a sticky pool on the floor, and a portly friar is snoring with a confidence that could shake the rafters. Waking them now would be a fool's errand, one likely to be met with curses or worse. Your first and most crucial task awaits. The fire, the great stone hearth, is the heart of the inn. Without it, there is no cooked food, no warmth, and no welcome. Letting the fire die completely overnight was a mark of a poor innkeeper, as restarting it from scratch with flint and steel was a chore best avoided. You crouch in the near-freezing air, your breath misting before you. Carefully, you uncover the embers from last night, buried under a layer of ash to preserve their heat. A gentle blow, a coaxing whisper of air, and a faint orange glow answers from the grey dust. You feed it delicately at first, a nest of dried moss and twigs, maybe a piece of precious charcloth that catches a spark with eager speed. As the tiny flames flicker to life, you add larger kindling, then split logs. The crackle of burning wood is the first true sound of the new day, a defiant answer to the oppressive silence. Slowly, a meager warmth begins to push back against the damp chill, casting long, dancing shadows across the sleeping forms in the room. The inn is beginning to breathe again, and you, its keeper, are the one who gives it life. You've survived the night, a feat in itself. Now, as the grey morning light filters through the grimy animal hide window, your stomach groans. It's time for breakfast, but erase any image you have of a cheerful, crackling hearth and a spread of comforting food. This is the medieval inn, where the first meal of the day is less about enjoyment and more about grim necessity. For most people in this era, the nobles, the devout, eating in the morning is considered a form of gluttony, a weakness of the flesh. But you're a traveler. You, along with the laborers and the sick, are granted a pass. Your body needs fuel for the long, punishing day on the road, and the innkeeper is here to provide it for a price. Forget a menu, there is no choice. The innkeeper's wife, a woman with forearms like cured hams from a lifetime of kneading dough, slops a wooden bowl down in front of you. Inside is a lumpy, brownish substance. It might be pottage, the cornerstone of medieval cuisine. Think of it as an eternal stew. It's a porridge of boiled grains like barley or oats, simmering in a pot over the fire that likely hasn't been properly cleaned in months. New ingredients are just added on top of the old. Last night's leftover beans, a few sad-looking cabbage leaves, maybe a chunk of turnip. You stir it with your wooden spoon and pray that the lump you just found is a piece of gristle and not something that fell from the rafters during the night. Alongside the bowl, you're given the other half of your meal, bread and ale. The bread is a dense, dark hunk made from rye or barley flour. It's heavy, coarse, and almost certainly stale. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Bread that's a day or two old is firm enough to be used as a tool. You watch the man next to you tear off a piece and use it to scoop up his pottage, the medieval equivalent of an edible spoon. If you were a bit wealthier, you might get a trencher, an even staler slice of bread that serves as your plate, which you might eat at the end or give to the dogs or the poor at the door. To wash this down, you have a tankard of ale, but this isn't the crisp, golden brew you might imagine. It's small ale, a cloudy, lukewarm, and nutritious drink often called liquid bread. It's brewed to be weak with very little alcohol, making it suitable for everyone, even children. You drink it because you have to. The water from the local stream could kill you, but the brewing process boils the water, making the ale the only safe thing to drink. You take a gulp. It's slightly sweet, slightly sour, and tastes vaguely of porridge. The quality is a lottery. Yesterday's batch might have been decent, but this morning's could be on the verge of turning to vinegar. The innkeeper might have even diluted it with water to stretch his profits, a common and dangerous trick. If you have a few extra coins, you might upgrade your meal. Perhaps a hard, sharp-tasting cheese that's been made to last for months. Or if you're lucky, a few slices of salty bacon or cold meat left over from the previous night's roast. But for most, the breakfast of champions is this: a bowl of mystery gruel, a brick of stale bread, and a mug of questionable ale. It's not meant to be savored, it's fuel. You choke it down, every gritty bite a reminder that your day, like the road ahead, is going to be a long, hard slog. The sun, still low and timid, spills a weak, milky light through the open shutters, painting stripes across the smoky air of the common room. The brief quiet of dawn is already a fading memory, replaced by the clatter of wooden mugs and the low hum of waking life. Most of the night's guests are stirring, pulling on boots, scratching at flea bites, and sharing the last of the bread from yesterday's bake. But it is the heavy thud of the main door swinging open that truly announces the start of the day. The first to cross the threshold is a merchant, and you can tell he's a man of some means, not by arrogance, but by the sheer confidence in his stride. He's built like a barrel, with a face weathered by roads and shrewd negotiations. He wears a bulky surcoat of a surprisingly bright, defiant blue, trimmed with what looks like rabbit fur, and a heavy leather belt cinches his considerable waist. Hanging from it is a large leather purse, a gypsy asterisk, clearly heavy with coin, and on his other side, a serviceable dagger hangs more as a tool than a threat. Wealthy merchants like him don't often carry swords themselves. They hire guards for that sort of trouble. Behind him, two tired-looking apprentices haul in wooden chests reinforced with iron. Their faces grim with the effort. He scans the room, his eyes missing nothing, before giving the innkeeper a crisp nod. "Ale," he booms, his voice accustomed to being heard over the din of a marketplace, "and whatever hot food you have that won't make a man regret it by midday." He doesn't wait for an answer, instead directing his apprentices to a corner table, their movements practiced and efficient. This man travels for a living, buying and selling the luxuries that peasants only hear about in stories: fine cloths, spices from distant lands, perhaps even glass or jewels. He is a vital artery in the kingdom's economy, a carrier of goods, and just as importantly, news from the wider world. Before the merchant's ale has even been drawn, the door swings open again, this time admitting a figure who looks like he's been wrestling with the road and lost. He's a messenger, reed-thin and covered in a layer of grime that speaks of hard, relentless travel. His clothes are functional but frayed, and his face is a mask of exhaustion and urgency. He carries a sealed leather satchel clutched tightly in one hand, the contents of which could be a declaration of war, a notice of a royal birth, or a simple business contract. The life of a messenger is a dangerous one. They are exposed to bandits, treacherous weather, and even the wrath of a lord displeased with the news they deliver. He ignores everyone, his eyes fixed on the innkeeper. He needs a fresh horse, a quick meal, and to be gone before the sun is fully risen. He is a fleeting presence, a ghost who passes through these common rooms, his only purpose to bridge the distance between powerful people. And then, almost unnoticed amidst the arrival of commerce and urgency, a third figure slips inside. He is a monk, draped in the simple white cowl of the Cistercian order, a stark contrast to the earthy tones of the inn. Cistercians are known for their austerity, their return to manual labor, and for building their monasteries in remote, quiet places, far from the temptations of towns, which makes his presence here, alone, all the more curious. While some monks travel on official business, visiting other monasteries, advising nobles, or founding new houses, they often do so in pairs. This one is solitary. He doesn't speak, merely finds a seat in the darkest corner of the room, pulling his hood low. He accepts a bowl of pottage with a silent nod, his eyes scanning the room from the shadows. He is an unnerving island of stillness in the growing current of the morning rush. In a medieval inn, a place where secrets are currency and travelers are rarely what they seem, a silent, observant monk is a man to be watched. As the sun bleeds across the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and purple, the inn's common room begins its nightly transformation. During the day, it's a place of quiet transactions and weary travelers, but as dusk settles, it sheds its skin, becoming the thrumming, chaotic heart of the village. This is where the day's grime is washed away with weak ale, and its frustrations are shouted into the smoky air. The heavy wooden door groans open and shut, each swing bringing in a new soul and a gust of evening chill. First come the locals, men whose faces are maps of their labor, farmers with dirt etched into the lines of their hands, blacksmiths with soot under their nails, and tanners who carry the faint, sweet smell of decay with them. They slump onto the long wooden benches, identities momentarily erased by shared exhaustion and a common thirst. They are soon followed by the travelers who have just settled their horses in the stables. There are merchants, their eyes still sharp and calculating, clutching their coin purses as they scan the room for threats and opportunities. Pilgrims, weary from the road, murmur prayers into their tankards, their piety a stark contrast to the boisterous energy swelling around them. And then there are the soldiers, flush with a little pay and a lot of arrogance, their laughter loud and their stories louder, each tale of valor growing more heroic with every drink. The air grows thick and heavy, a soupy mixture of wood smoke from the hearth, roasting meat, damp wool, and the unmistakable scent of dozens of unwashed bodies crammed into one space. The floor, already covered in straw and rushes to soak up spills, and whatever else finds its way down, is quickly trampled into a fragrant mulch. A dog, its fur damp from the evening dew, wanders between tables, sniffing for fallen scraps, while the innkeeper's cat watches the chaos with regal indifference from a ceiling beam. The symphony begins. It starts as a low hum of conversation, a murmur of gossip and news exchanged over the rims of wooden cups. A farmer complains about the price of grain, a merchant whispers of trouble on the northern roads, and a woman shares a rumor about the priest's new housekeeper. But as more ale is poured, the volume swells. Laughter erupts, sharp and sudden. Arguments flare up over trivial matters, a spilled drink, a disputed debt, a careless insult. Voices rise in volume and pitch, layering over one another in a cacophony of boasts, jokes, and curses. In one corner, a game of dice is underway. A circle of men huddle together, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight. Bets are shouted, coins or goods are tossed into the center, and the clatter of bone dice on the wooden table is followed by either a triumphant cheer or a guttural curse. Cheating is not just suspected, it's practically part of the game. Across the room, a traveling minstrel, his face flushed with ale and ambition, might pluck at a lute, his songs of epic battles and lost love struggling to be heard over the din. Soon, the patrons join in, bellowing out the choruses they know and mumbling through the verses they don't, their voices a joyous, drunken roar. There is no etiquette here. Men spit freely into the rushes on the floor, wipe greasy hands on their tunics, and belch without apology. Food is eaten with fingers or with a personal knife carried at the belt. The stale bread trencher that serves as a plate is often gnawed on or tossed to the dogs when the meal is done. This is a place stripped of all pretense and piety. It's a microcosm of medieval life itself, raw, unapologetic, and dangerously alive. Here for a few hours, a lord and a laborer might drink from the same pitcher, a pilgrim and a pickpocket might share a bench, and the stories they swap become the currency of the night, traded back and forth until the fire burns low and the ale runs dry. You've survived the questionable ale and the communal sleeping arrangements, but now a new, more primal feeling takes over: hunger. You follow your nose, or rather, the thick, ever-present haze of smoke, towards the heart of the inn, the kitchen. Forget the orderly, stainless steel sanctuaries of modern cooking. This is a medieval kitchen, a chaotic symphony of fire, sweat, and simmering secrets, located right next to the main hall for maximum convenience and minimum peace. The moment you step through the archway, the world changes. The air is a physical thing, thick with wood smoke that stings your eyes and coats the back of your throat. Soot darkens the stone walls and clings to the heavy wooden beams overhead, from which hang bundles of drying herbs, their fragrance a ghost in the smog. The room is a furnace, dominated by a massive hearth, a roaring, open maw of flame where most of the cooking happens. There's no temperature dial, no gentle blue flame. This is raw, untamed fire, a constant living presence that dictates the rhythm of the entire room. The heat is so intense it feels like a solid wall, and the floor, a treacherous landscape of packed earth and scattered rushes, is slick with spilled grease and, well, you'd rather not guess. In the center of this chaos, presiding over a gigantic, blackened cauldron suspended from an iron hook, is the inn's cook. He's a mountain of a man, his face permanently flushed from the heat, his apron a collage of old stains. He doesn't measure, he doesn't taste with a clean spoon. He cooks by instinct, by the feel of the heat and the smell of the steam. Around him, scullions and kitchen boys scurry like ants, hauling buckets of water from the well, chopping vegetables with heavy-bladed knives on worn wooden blocks, and turning the spit for a roasting joint of meat, a rare luxury most guests will only get to smell. This isn't a place of culinary art, it's a factory of sustenance, a brutal, demanding workshop where every meal is a battle against spoilage, fire, and filth. And in that great, bubbling cauldron, the centerpiece of the entire operation, is your dinner. It's pottage, but this isn't the soup you know. This is the cornerstone of the medieval diet, a thick, gloopy stew that has been simmering for days, maybe even weeks. They call it a perpetual stew. Yesterday's leftovers, today's additions, and tomorrow's hopes are all in that pot. The cook ladles some out for a guest, then tops it off with a bucket of water and whatever ingredients are on hand, ensuring the pot is never empty and the flavor is constantly evolving. So what's really in it? For the common traveler, it's a humble affair. The base is whatever grains are cheap, barley or oats to thicken it into a sludge. Then come the vegetables, the hardy survivors of the medieval garden: turnips, parsnips, leeks, onions, and heaps of cabbage. Forget potatoes or tomatoes, those are centuries away. This is a palette of earthy, slightly bitter flavors, boiled for hours until any individual texture is a distant memory. Meat, that's a sign of wealth. If you're lucky, the pottage might contain a few stringy bits of salted pork or some gristle from a leftover bone, thrown in to give the broth a whisper of flavor. But fresh meat is a rarity. Most of the meat in this kitchen has been preserved through ancient, desperate methods. It's been heavily salted, smoked over the fire, or dried until it's as tough as leather. This isn't about enhancing flavor. It's a grim necessity to stop the meat from rotting in a world without refrigeration. The cook will take a hunk of this salt-cured bacon, rinse it a few times to wash off the worst of the brine, and chop it into the pot, its intense saltiness overpowering everything else. And the secrets, oh, the kitchen is full of them. That slightly off taste you can't quite place, it might be from root vegetables that were stored a little too long in the damp cellar, already starting to soften and rot. The cook might try to mask it with a handful of herbs from the garden, or if the innkeeper is feeling generous, a pinch of expensive spice to hide the flavor of decay. Those mushrooms might have been foraged by a boy who isn't entirely sure which ones are safe. And hygiene. The concept barely exists. Water is hauled from a well of questionable purity. The cook wipes his hands on his already filthy apron. Wooden bowls and spoons are likely just wiped clean with a rag or a piece of stale bread before being used for the next guest. In this smoky, chaotic world, a little bit of grit and a few stray germs are just part of the recipe. You take your bowl of pottage, find a spot on a bench, and dip in your hard, crusty bread. It's warm, it's filling, and it probably won't kill you. In medieval England, that's the best review a meal can get. You've survived the chaotic symphony of the common room, and now, heavy with ale and pottage, your thoughts turn to sleep. But in a medieval inn, laying your head down for the night isn't a simple transaction. It's a descent, or if you have the coin, an ascent, through a rigid hierarchy of comfort, a ladder where each rung takes you further from or closer to the grime, noise, and communal reality of the 14th century. Don't expect a menu of options or a friendly concierge. Your wealth, or lack of it, has already decided your fate for the night. For the wealthy merchant, the minor noble, or the high-ranking cleric, the innkeeper's toothless grin might widen as he leads you up a narrow, winding staircase, away from the clamor below. This is the inn's version of first class, the private chamber. The word private is, of course, a medieval exaggeration. It really just means you won't be sleeping next to a stranger who might steal your purse or give you lice. As the heavy wooden door creaks open, you're greeted by a room that feels like a different world. There might be a real bed, a massive four-poster with ropes for support, and several mattresses layered like geological strata. The bottom layer is straw, then perhaps wool, and if you're truly fortunate, a feather mattress on top that whispers of unimaginable luxury. The air in here is still smoky, but it's a gentler smoke, perhaps from your own personal fireplace crackling in the corner, a privilege that costs a small fortune. The windows might even have wooden shutters you can close against the night, a flimsy barrier against the cold and the sounds of the courtyard below. You'll find a sturdy wooden chest for your belongings and maybe even a small table with a basin and a jug of water for washing your face and hands. This isn't just a room, it's a statement. It declares you are someone of substance, someone who can afford the ultimate medieval luxury, a door that separates you from the rest of humanity, at least until morning. But let's be realistic. Most travelers aren't nobles. If you're a skilled artisan, a traveling scholar, or a well-to-do farmer, you'll be guided to the next tier of accommodation, the communal sleeping chamber. Forget privacy. This is a large room, often a loft or an upper floor, filled with anywhere from 2 to a dozen beds. And these aren't single beds. They're wide, sagging structures, each designed to hold 3, maybe 4 people. This is where the social lottery of the road truly begins. You pay for a spot in a bed, not the bed itself. Your bedfellows for the night could be anyone, a snoring wool merchant, a quiet pilgrim on his way to a distant shrine, or a jittery soldier with a cough that sounds suspiciously like the plague. There are unspoken rules, of course. You're expected to keep to your own space, minimize fidgeting, and avoid too much physical contact. But in the dark, under a shared, lumpy blanket, these rules often dissolve into a tangled mess of limbs and snores. The concept of personal space has not been invented yet. Here you sleep with your clothes on, your coin purse tied tightly to your wrist, and one ear open for any sudden movements. The room is a chorus of medieval life, coughing, muttering, and the relentless scratching that proves fleas and lice are the most democratic of creatures, feasting on rich and poor alike. But what if you can't even afford a shared spot in a bed? What if your coin pouch is nearly empty, and all you need is a roof to keep the rain off your head? For you, my friend, there is the lowest rung of the ladder. You are paying not for a bed, but for space. The innkeeper, his hospitality now reduced to a gruff nod, gestures toward the common room you just left. Your bed for the night is the floor. If you're lucky, you get a patch of straw or rushes near the hearth, where the dying embers offer a faint, smoky warmth. You might huddle on a bench, trying to find a position that doesn't send a splinter into your back. Here you are one with the chaos. The last of the drunks will stumble over you on their way out. The innkeeper's dogs will sniff at you, deciding if you're a friend or a potential meal. The floor is a sticky, uneven landscape of spilled ale, mud, and things you'd rather not identify. You curl up, using your cloak as a blanket and your bag as a pillow, trying to ignore the drafts that snake through the poorly constructed walls. Sleep doesn't come easily here. It's a series of fitful dozes, punctuated by the sounds of the inn settling, the snores of the bodies scattered around you, and the gnawing fear that a rat might mistake your ear for a forgotten crust of bread. This isn't rest. It's a ceasefire with the elements, a temporary truce in the constant battle for survival. From the curtained luxury of the private chamber to the cold, hard reality of the floor, the inn doesn't just offer shelter, it reflects the brutal, unvarnished truth of the medieval world. Your worth is measured in coins, and your comfort is a direct reflection of what you can pay. Step inside the common room, and you step into the heart of the inn's entire world. But this isn't the domain of the innkeeper you met outside. Oh no, this room, this swirling hub of noise, smoke, and humanity belongs entirely to his wife. She is the alewife, the brewster, and in this space she is queen. For centuries, brewing was women's work. It grew naturally from the duties of the home, a task as fundamental as baking bread or tending the hearth. In a world where water could kill you faster than a roadside bandit, ale wasn't a luxury. It was a nutritious, life-sustaining necessity. It was often called liquid bread, and for good reason. It provided calories, hydration, and a measure of safety from tainted wells. Everyone drank it, from children sipping on weak, low-alcohol, small beer, to laborers who might even take their wages in it. The alewife's day starts long before the first traveler bangs on the door. It starts with the grain, usually barley or oats, which she soaks for days until it sprouts. Then comes the drying and grinding, followed by mixing it with hot water in a great, bubbling cauldron that sits permanently over the fire, a fixture as central to the room as the hearth itself. There's a sweet, malty smell that permeates everything, a scent of creation. She adds no hops. That's a bittering agent used in the newer continental drink they call beer, which lasts longer but lacks the familiar, fruity sweetness of traditional English ale. Instead, she might use a secret mix of herbs and spices called gruit, perhaps some bog myrtle for bitterness, a little sage, or even pine needles, a recipe passed down from her mother and her mother before her. Yeast is a mystery, a gift from God. They don't understand the science, only the magic. The froth from a previous batch, called barm, is scraped off and used to leaven the inn's bread and kickstart the next brew. The whole process is a delicate, tedious dance, but it's a craft that affords a woman a rare degree of financial freedom and authority. While her husband manages the lodgings and the stables, the common room and its profits are hers. Her domain is a chaotic symphony of the senses. The air is thick with wood smoke from the central hearth, the smell of damp wool cloaks steaming by the fire, and the ever-present sour tang of fermentation. The floor is packed earth, covered in a layer of rushes and straw that's periodically swept out, taking with it dropped food, spilled ale, and whatever else has fallen. Light is a precious commodity, flickering from tallow candles that sputter and spit, casting long, dancing shadows on the Waterland daub walls. She moves through this space with an unshakable authority. With a wooden ladle, she fills earthenware pitchers and pewter tankards from the barrels at the end of the room. There's no bar to stand behind. She navigates the crowded benches and trestle tables, collecting coins before she pours. She's a judge of character, a keeper of peace, and a gatherer of news. She knows who is nursing a single cup for hours, who is gambling away their week's earnings on a game of dice in the corner, and who is a traveler with stories from afar. Her presence is a constant negotiation. She decides who gets served, who gets another round, and who gets thrown out into the mud. But her position is precarious. As a woman running a public-facing business, she is a target for suspicion. Religious authorities paint alewives as temptresses, dishonest shrews who water down their ale, overcharge their customers, and lead good men into sin. Ballads and sermons caricature her as an ugly, immoral crone destined for hell. Officials called ale conners might visit, tasked with checking the quality and price of her brew, often targeting her more than her male counterparts. And if her ale is found wanting, the fines are steep. Yet despite the whispers and the scrutiny, her customers keep coming. Because here, in her kingdom of smoke and noise, she provides more than just a drink. She offers warmth, a refuge from the road, and a place where the rigid hierarchies of the outside world blur just a little. Here, a pilgrim, a merchant, and a farmer can all share a bench, their voices rising and falling in a chorus of complaint, celebration, and gossip. For a few precious hours, under the watchful eye of the alewife, they are just men drinking ale. And in medieval Europe, that simple act is the very foundation of society. As the sun bleeds out below the horizon, the inn groans to life with a different kind of energy. The day's weariness gives way to a restless, smoky haze of evening reverie. This is when the common room ceases to be a place of rest and becomes the social heartbeat of the village, a theater of cheap thrills and fleeting fortunes. In one corner, hunched over a wobbly table stained with the ghosts of 1,000 spilled tankards, a group of men are lost in the rattle and clatter of dice. Gambling is the night's favorite pastime, a simple pleasure that requires nothing but luck and a few coins to lose. They're playing hazard, a game of pure chance that's as popular as it is ruinous. A farmer, his face flushed with ale, specifies a number, his main, and throws the 2 small, sharp-edged dice crafted from bone. A cheer erupts from one side, a groan from the other. Money, what little they have, exchanges hands. It's a fast, brutal game that can make a man or undo him in the twinkling of an eye. These games are technically illegal in many towns, frowned upon by the church as an invitation to sin and ruin, but here in the dim, boisterous confines of the inn, the law is a distant rumor. The innkeeper himself often acts as a banker, happy to hold a man's coat or tools as collateral for another round. Cheating is rampant. Some dice are weighted, hollowed out, and filled with a drop of mercury to favor a certain number. Getting caught is a serious offense. Punishments range from having the false dice pierced through your palm to being publicly shamed in the pillory. Tonight, however, the only justice is the swift, fickle kind dealt by the dice themselves. Air is thick with the sweet, malty scent of ale, the undisputed king of medieval drinks. It's cloudy, low in alcohol, and nutritious, often seen as safer than water and a meal in itself. For those with a bit more coin, there's mead, a sweet and potent brew of fermented honey, or cider sharp and strong, especially popular in regions where apples are plentiful. The wealthy merchant in the corner sips on wine, likely imported from France, a luxury that sets him apart from the common folk. Some are drinking stranger concoctions, like posset, a comforting mix of hot ale or wine curdled with milk and spices, served warm like a boozy custard. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door creaks open, letting in a gust of cold night air and a new figure. He's a wandering minstrel, a traveler whose trade is song and story. He's a wiry man with a lute slung over his back and a patch over one eye, his remaining eye sharp and knowing. Minstrels are the living newspapers and entertainers of the age, traveling from town to town, court to tavern, their heads filled with everything from epic poems and tales of chivalry to bawdy songs and local gossip. Finding a spot near the fire, he doesn't wait for an invitation. He strums a chord on his lute, the sound cutting through the din. The dice game pauses, heads turn. The minstrel, a little servant of the arts, begins to sing. His voice is rough but clear, telling a story of a foolish knight and a clever maiden. It's a humorous, slightly scandalous tune, perfect for a tavern crowd. Between verses, he might recite a poem about a far-off battle or improvise a few lines about the grumpy-looking innkeeper. He is a master of his audience, playing for his supper, his drink, and a few coins to toss in his hat. For a few brief moments, the quarrels and the gambling fade, and the entire room is captivated, bound together by a simple story and a melody plucked from a 6-stringed lute. This is the magic of the medieval inn, a fleeting escape from a hard life, bought for the price of a drink and a song. The strong ale has been flowing for hours, and the air in the common room, already thick with smoke and sweat, now crackles with a different kind of energy. The camaraderie of the early evening has curdled into something tense and mean. In a world defined by rigid hierarchy, the inn is a great and dangerous leveler, a place where a farmer, a mercenary, and a disgruntled weaver might all share the same bench, their elbows brushing and their pride just as close to the surface. This is a combustible mix of alcohol, weapons, and fragile honor, and tonight, it's about to ignite. It starts, as it so often does, over nothing important, a game of hazard, the frantic clatter of dice on a scarred wooden table. A surly blacksmith accuses a traveling peddler of using loaded dice. The peddler, his tongue loosened by drink, offers a reply that questions the blacksmith's parentage. An insult is thrown, a jostle becomes a shove, and in the space between one breath and the next, the common room explodes. There is no warning bell, no slow-motion build-up. One moment, there is drunken singing. The next, a wooden tankard arcs through the air, spraying ale and connecting with the peddler's skull with a sickening crack. The fight is immediate and brutal. This isn't a duel of honor. It's a desperate, clumsy storm of violence. Men are armed with daggers they use for cutting their bread, and if need be, their neighbors. But more often, the weapons are whatever is at hand. A heavy stool swung like a club, a clay jug brought down on a shoulder, fists wrapped around pewter mugs to give them weight. Men grapple and fall, knocking over benches and sending dice scattering into the rushes. The noise is a chaotic symphony of grunts, curses, and the splintering of wood. Friends of the brawlers, bound by village loyalty or drunken solidarity, jump into the fray. It's no longer a one-on-one dispute. It's a swirling vortex of violence threatening to consume the entire room. And this is where the innkeeper, or in this case, his formidable wife, proves she is the true ruler of this domain. She doesn't scream for help. She doesn't plead for calm. She wades directly into the chaos, armed with the authority of ownership and a heavy iron ladle that's been used to stir the pottage for a decade. She moves with a grim purpose, her face a mask of cold fury. The first man she reaches, the blacksmith, receives the flat of the ladle squarely between his shoulder blades. The blow is hard enough to steal his breath and his fighting spirit. She shoves another man back, her voice a low growl that cuts through the din. The innkeeper himself is now moving around the edge of the brawl, not to fight, but to protect his property and his other paying customers. His justice is not about fairness, it's about profit and the restoration of order. He grabs the peddler by the scruff of his tunic and hauls him, bleeding and dazed, towards the door. The brawl ends as quickly as it began. The blacksmith, nursing his bruised back, is pinned against the wall by the innkeeper's wife. The verdict is delivered without a trial. "You'll pay for the bench," she snarls, gesturing to the splintered remains, "and the jug, and the drinks for the men whose knees you bruised." The victory, if he can even call it that, suddenly feels very, very expensive. His friends are now silent, unwilling to meet the alewife's gaze. The loser, the peddler, is unceremoniously tossed out into the muddy street, his belongings thrown after him. There is no refund for his bed, no concern for his well-being. He has broken the peace of the inn, and for that he is exiled. If he's lucky, the town watch won't find him and throw him in the stocks for the night. But calling the watch is a last resort. They are unreliable, often corrupt, and their presence is bad for business. The innkeeper prefers to handle his own justice, swift, brutal, and designed to send one clear message. In his house, the only law that truly matters is his own. The sun bleeds out across the horizon, and a chill begins to creep from the damp corners of the earth. Inside the inn, the mood shifts. The frantic energy of arrival gives way to something heavier, something more intimate. As the last rays of light fade, the innkeeper and his staff begin a familiar ritual, a transformation that happens every single night. This isn't just closing time, it's a fortification. With a groan of strained wood, the massive oak door is heaved shut. A heavy wooden bar, thick as a man's thigh, is dropped into iron brackets, sealing the entrance. It's a sound that resonates through the great hall, a deep, definitive thud that says the outside world, with its bandits and its beasts, is now officially locked out. Shutters are latched over the few precious windows, plunging the common room into a deeper gloom, broken only by the roaring hearth and the sputtering tallow candles that cast long, dancing shadows on the grimy walls. This is the moment the inn ceases to be a public house and becomes a sealed vessel, a temporary fortress for the night. In many medieval towns, this isn't just good practice, it's the law. A curfew bell might have already rung out across the settlement, a signal for all fires to be covered and the streets to be cleared. Anyone caught outside after that bell without a lantern, and a very good reason, risks being detained by the night watch or worse. For the travelers inside, the barred door is a comfort, but it's also a trap. No one gets in, but no one gets out either, not until the sun rises again. You are now locked in with the best and worst of humanity. The atmosphere in the common room thickens with smoke and suspicion. The fire, now the room's true heart, draws everyone closer. At the long wooden tables, the social order of the road dissolves into a murky stew. A wealthy merchant, who earlier made a show of securing his goods in the inn's lockable storage, now eyes the ragged pilgrim beside him with distrust. A pair of soldiers, their allegiances unknown, drink heavily and speak in low tones. Information is currency here. People listen more than they talk, trying to gauge who might be a threat and who might be a mark. Robbers and their accomplices were known to frequent inns, gathering intelligence on wealthy travelers and their routes. The friendly stranger sharing your bench could be planning to lighten your purse on the road tomorrow. As the ale flows, the noise level rises. It's a cacophony of drunken songs, arguments over dice games, and the incessant hacking coughs of your fellow lodgers. Fights are common, often flaring up from nothing: a spilled drink, a misplaced accusation, a drunken insult. Tempers, frayed by long journeys and cheap ale, can erupt into brutal violence. Men carried knives, and a simple brawl could easily end with a blade in the ribs. The innkeeper, a man responsible for security, watches everything, ready to break up fights before they cost him furniture or attract the wrong kind of attention. But the dangers aren't just human. The night is filled with other fears, whispered in hushed tones around the fire. This is a world steeped in superstition, where the darkness outside the thick stone walls is not empty. People believe the veil between the living and the dead is thin, especially on cold, windy nights. Travelers share stories of spectral processions, of demons that lurk at crossroads, and of witches who can steal a man's vitality or curdle the milk. A sudden sneeze must be followed by a "God bless you," not out of politeness, but to prevent the devil from entering your body through your open mouth. Black cats are seen as omens of witchcraft, and a howling dog could signal a death in the house. In this flickering, uncertain light, every shadow seems to hold a secret, every creak of the floorboards a potential threat. You're surrounded by strangers, their faces half hidden in the gloom, their intentions unreadable. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and spilled ale, a scent both suffocating and strangely comforting. You are safe from the wolves and the outlaws on the road, but inside these four walls, you are in a different kind of wilderness, a crowded, volatile ecosystem of fear, fatigue, and desperation. The doors are barred, but the real shadows, the ones that follow you inside, are just beginning to stir. The ale has warmed your belly, and the fire has chased the chill from your bones, but now the hour grows late. The innkeeper, seeing you yawn, gestures toward a rickety staircase in the corner. It's time to find your bed. Except, your bed isn't a concept that exists here. Privacy, much like hygiene, is a luxury the medieval world has not yet invented. You climb the stairs into a long, low-ceilinged room. This isn't a hallway with private chambers. This is the sleeping quarter. A handful of large wooden bedsteads are scattered about the space, maybe a dozen in total. This is it. This is your accommodation. If you're lucky, you've paid enough for a spot on one of these beds. If not, the floor, with its grimy rushes and the lingering scent of spilled everything, is your final destination. Let's say you've splurged. You approach one of the beds. It's a simple wooden frame, crisscrossed with ropes that have to be tightened frequently, the origin of the phrase "sleep tight." On top of this webbing rests a palliasse, which is essentially a large sack made of coarse linen or canvas. What's inside? Straw. If this is a reputable inn, the straw is relatively fresh, maybe even mixed with fragrant herbs like bed straw to mask the other, less pleasant odors. If it's a lesser establishment, that straw has been there for weeks, flattened and shared by countless travelers before you. It rustles with more than just hay. Bed bugs, fleas, and lice aren't just pests here, they're your roommates. Everyone has them, and everyone shares them. But you won't be sharing the bed with just insects. You'll be sharing it with people, complete strangers. Personal space is an unaffordable extravagance. Beds are enormous because they're designed to hold multiple occupants, 3, 4, sometimes even more. It's a matter of practicality. Beds are expensive, and warmth is generated by bodies huddled together. The innkeeper points to a space next to a snoring merchant who still has his boots on and a pilgrim muttering prayers in his sleep. There are no partitions, no curtains for you. You're expected to lie down, minimize your fidgeting, and avoid too much physical contact, though in the cramped darkness, that's easier said than done. You can hear every cough, every wheeze, every whispered conversation from the other beds. The air is thick with the combined breath and body odor of a dozen slumbering souls. You lie back, the prickly straw poking through the thin linen sheet, if you're lucky enough to have one. You pull a rough wool blanket over you, a prized and valuable item, and try to ignore the fact that the man beside you smells faintly of pickled fish and despair. Security is another concern. With no lockable rooms, you sleep lightly, clutching your coin purse, aware that the person sharing your warmth could just as easily share your belongings. Robbers were known to frequent inns. listening in on conversations to identify their next target. This is the medieval inn's promise of rest, a lumpy, itchy, overcrowded bed where you are never truly alone. It's not about comfort, it's about survival. You're out of the rain, you're near a fire, and you're safer than you would be on the open road. For tonight, in this symphony of snores, it will have to be enough. As the fire in the great hearth collapses into a heap of glowing embers, and the last of the rowdy drinkers are pushed out into the muddy street, the medieval inn transforms. The broad, boisterous common room shrinks into a space of shadows and secrets. This is when the day's noise fades and the whispers begin. In an age without printing presses or royal couriers for the common man, the inn was the nerve center of information, a place where news, gossip, and rumor were the most valuable currency, traded over the dregs of watered-down ale. Imagine the scene. The candles are burning low, their tallow smoke adding to the haze from the hearth. Huddled at a sticky table in the corner, a merchant, his face illuminated by the flickering light, recounts what he saw on the road from the last market town. He speaks of rising taxes, of a lord's displeasure with the king, of a strange sickness that took hold of a village 2 days' ride from here. To the locals, who may never travel more than 10 miles from their home in their entire lives, this is news from a foreign land. News traveled only as fast as a person on foot or hoof, and here, in the inn, is where the world arrived, one story at a time. The patrons lean in, their faces a mixture of fear and fascination. A grizzled man-at-arms, his campaign days behind him, scoffs at the merchant's tale of a poor harvest, claiming he heard from a pilgrim that the French are planning to raid the coast again. Who to believe? In the medieval inn, truth was a slippery thing, often colored by the teller's motives and distorted with each retelling. It was a living, breathing network where gossip about a cheating wife could mingle with vital intelligence about troop movements. This was the medieval world's chaotic, unreliable, and utterly essential version of the nightly news. But not all the whispers were idle gossip. In these same shadowed corners, more dangerous conversations took root. The anonymity of a crowded, dimly lit room offered cover for those with seditious thoughts. That group of farmers in the corner, are they merely complaining about the price of grain, or are they whispering about organizing a refusal to pay the tithe? That well-dressed stranger who keeps to himself, is he a spy for a rival lord, listening for loose tongues? History tells us that inns and taverns were notorious hotbeds of discontent. They were the places where mobs and uprisings were born. Under the guise of shared drink and camaraderie, plots could be hatched that could topple local officials or spark a full-blown rebellion. The French chronicler Jean Froissart noted how insurgents used taverns to conspire against city authorities. A fiery sermon from a wandering preacher over a mug of beer, a hushed agreement between disgruntled craftsmen, a plan to waylay a tax collector on the road. These were the seeds of treason planted in the fertile ground of the inn's common room. The innkeeper, of course, saw and heard much of it. He had to be a shrewd observer, a psychologist, and sometimes an informant. Reporting suspicious behavior to the local authorities was often a requirement of his license. Yet turning in his own customers was a risky business. An innkeeper's loyalty was a commodity, bought with coin or threats. He walked a tightrope, caught between the law and the often lawless men who filled his coffers. For in the medieval inn, every whisper carried weight, every secret had a price, and the difference between a harmless rumor and a hanging offense could be as thin as the watered-down wine. The last slurred song has been sung, the final argument settled with a clumsy shove out the door. Silence, heavy and thick, finally descends upon the inn's common room. It's a quiet that isn't peaceful. It's the quiet of a battlefield after the fighting stops, thick with the ghosts of the evening's chaos. The fire in the great hearth has burned down to a pile of sullen, glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows that make the discarded mugs on the tables look like sleeping beasts. The air is a dense fog of stale ale, sweat, wood smoke, and something vaguely like wet dog. This is the part of the innkeeper's day no traveler ever sees, the moment the performance ends and the real work begins. Your first task is the floor. It's not wood, not stone, but beaten earth, hard-packed from years of stomping feet, and it is a disaster. It's covered in a layer of rushes, long dried reeds meant to insulate and absorb the day's filth. Tonight they've absorbed plenty. They're slick with spilled ale, littered with gnawed on bones the dogs missed, scraps of hardened bread, and mystery muck trodden in from the street. You don't sweep it, not at first. With a long-handled rake, you begin the grim task of pulling the most defiled rushes into a pile. The sound is a damp, scratchy scrape. Every pull reveals a new layer of grime underneath. It's a slow, back-aching process. Once the worst of it is gathered, you take a stiff besom broom, a bundle of twigs tied to a stick, and begin sweeping the rest of the rushes and debris toward the door. There's no dustpan. You sweep it straight outside into the night, adding to the midden heap behind the inn where food scraps, animal waste, and other refuse slowly rot down. Some of this waste is valuable. Urine is collected to be sold to tanners, and other organic matter can fertilize the kitchen garden, but much of it is simply a necessary evil of business. Now you can see the floor itself, stained and dark. If there's a particularly stubborn or greasy patch, you might grab a handful of sand and use it as an abrasive, scrubbing the spot with a wet rag until the grime lifts. Then you bring in fresh rushes. You don't just scatter them loosely. That's a rookie mistake. They're often tied into small bunches or woven into rough mats to keep them from scattering everywhere. Into this new layer, you sprinkle dried herbs, lavender, mint, chamomile, not just for the pleasant smell, but to deter fleas and other pests that thrive in the straw bedding and dark corners. It's a constant battle, and the sweet, clean scent is a fleeting victory against the inn's permanent funk. Next, the tables and benches. They are rough-hewn timber, dark with age and sticky to the touch. You take a wooden bucket filled with hot water from the cauldron that's always simmering over the hearth, and a coarse linen cloth. The soap, if you can call it that, is a soft, dark, gelatinous substance made from animal fat and wood ash lye. It doesn't lather like modern soap. It's caustic and harsh, and after a night of scrubbing, your hands will be raw and red. You scrub every surface, wiping away rings of dried ale, greasy fingerprints, and bits of food. The wooden trenchers and mugs are collected and taken to the scullery. There's no sink, just a large wooden tub. Each one is scrubbed with sand to scour off the grease, then rinsed in the same murky water. Metal pots are given the same treatment, the sand scraping away the cooked-on stew. It's a relentless, thankless task. The fire is tended to last. You carefully bank the embers, preserving the precious heat for the morning. A new log is laid on top, ready to be coaxed back to life before dawn. You look around the common room. It's not clean, not by any modern standard. The air still smells faintly of old beer and humanity. The new rushes look fresh, but you know what lies beneath. The tables are no longer sticky, but they bear the scars of 1,000 knife points and spilled drinks. It's a reset, not a restoration. You bolt the heavy wooden door, the sound echoing in the sudden emptiness. The mice, ever-present residents, will soon come out to scavenge for anything you've missed. Bedbugs lie in wait in the straw mattresses upstairs. The battle is never truly won, but for now, the inn is quiet. It breathes in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise and for the whole messy, glorious cycle to begin once more. The last drunken song has dissolved into a slurred mumble. The final argument over dropped coin has ended in a disgruntled truce. One by one, the patrons have either stumbled out into the pitch-dark street, hopping to navigate by memory and moonlight, or made their way clumsily towards the promise of a straw-stuffed mattress upstairs. The common room, a churning sea of humanity just an hour ago, finally begins to settle. This is the innkeeper's hour. While his wife and any hired help have likely collapsed into their own beds, his work isn't quite done. His first task is security. With a heavy wooden bar, he bolts the main door, a solid thud that echoes in the now quiet space. That gate won't just keep late-night wanderers out. It's also to ensure no one leaves without settling their bill come morning. He moves through the room, his footsteps slow and deliberate on the grimy floorboards. He collects any empty mugs, his eyes scanning for anything amiss. A passed-out traveler who hasn't paid, a suspicious character feigning sleep too close to a merchant's discarded pack. The great hearth, the roaring heart of the inn, is now a landscape of glowing embers. He carefully banks the coals, preserving the precious heat for the morning. The air, thick for hours with the smells of sweat, wet wool, spilled ale, and roasting meat, now takes on a different character. The sharp smells fade, leaving behind the ghost of wood smoke, old grease, and the faint, sweet scent of decaying rushes on the floor. the building itself begins to speak. The old timbers of the inn, no longer drowned out by human noise, groan and creak as they settle in the night's cool air. A loose shutter rattles in the wind. From the stables, the soft stamp of a horse or a rustle in the hay is a reminder that the inn is a living, breathing organism, sheltering not just people but their livelihoods. Now for sleep, but it's not the private, peaceful affair we know. If the innkeeper and his family are lucky, they have their own small room separated from the chaos. For the guests, it's an entirely different story. The concept of a private room is a luxury few can afford, and many inns simply don't have them. Most travelers are headed for the communal sleeping quarters. This might be a large room filled with several beds, each one intended to hold 3 or 4 people. Yes, you'd be sharing your bed not just with your traveling companions, but with complete strangers. There was an etiquette to this forced intimacy. You were expected to minimize fidgeting and avoid unnecessary contact, but comfort was a distant dream. And the beds themselves, a wooden frame, often with rope webbing stretched across that needed to be tightened frequently, the origin of the saying, "sleep tight." On top of this sat a palliasse, a thin mattress stuffed with whatever was cheap and available, straw, horsehair, maybe even rags. If you were very fortunate, there might be a feather mattress on top of that, but for most, it was a lumpy, rustling affair, and you weren't alone in that straw. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs were constant, unwelcome companions, a simple fact of medieval life. For those who couldn't even afford a spot in a shared bed, the floor of the common room was their destination. They'd find a spot near the fadding warmth of the hearth, using their own cloak as a blanket and a bundled-up pack as a pillow. The servants of the inn would be the last to lie down, finding their own space on the rush-covered floor after their work was finally done. Sleep in a medieval inn isn't a long, unbroken rest. It comes in fragments, punctuated by the symphony of the room, the chorus of snoring from a dozen strangers, someone coughing, another muttering in their sleep, the scuttling of a rat in the walls. Every creak of a floorboard, every distant shout from the street could jolt a person awake. You didn't so much sleep as stand guard with your eyes closed, one hand instinctively kept on your coin purse. Yet, for all the noise, the pests, and the profound lack of privacy, this was safety. It was a roof over your head, a locked door between you and the dangers of the road. For a few fleeting hours, the chaos of the medieval world is held at bay. The inn, and everyone within it, finally, tentatively, sleeps. So the fire dies down to glowing embers, the last drunken song fades into a chorus of snores, and the common room becomes a landscape of sleeping strangers, huddled together for warmth and safety. The day is done. What you've just experienced wasn't just a night at a hotel. The medieval inn, the splintered mug, was the messy, beating heart of its world. It was a crossroads where every layer of society collided, the wealthy merchant and the desperate messenger, the devout monk and the crooked gambler, the local farmer and the weary soldier. It was the internet of its time, a place where news, rumors, and diseases traveled at the speed of a tired horse. Forget the romanticized, cozy taverns of fantasy. The real medieval inn was a crucible, a place of filth and fleas, of questionable food and communal beds. But in that chaos, it offered something essential, a fragile sanctuary in a dangerous world. It was a flickering candle against an endless night, a place where a shared bench and a mug of ale was the only comfort to be found. It wasn't home, but for one night, in the middle of nowhere, it was enough. And that brings our stay at the Splintered Mug to a close. If you enjoyed this journey back through the grime and glory of the past, please give this video a like. And if you want to explore more hidden corners of the world that was, make sure you subscribe to *** Dreamtime History ***. Thanks for watching, and sleep well. At least